The internet is replete with people's lists of most favorites. Sometimes these are fun to read or listen to and compare with our own tastes. Sometimes I find them really useful if I'm exploring a new topic. So, this episode will hopefully provide a bit of both for those ancient and new fans of Rush. What are my top 7 Rush albums? Right now, these would be the go-tos for me. But this list is very time-specific. If you asked me 2 years ago, this would have looked considerably different. And the list will look different probably in 6 months. Today's list is set out in no particular order. Permanent Waves. Opening the LP with a solid, electrifying zinger, The Spirit of Radio, is doubly cool for fans in Toronto. This song was a tribute to a fairly new, at that time, and somewhat alternative radio station, CFNY 102.1, with the tagline, The Spirit of Radio. This song merges power rock with segues of reggae-style rhythms and adds nods to lyrical content from the likes of Simon and Garfunkel. Free Will and Jacob's Ladder are pure hard rock layered with Rush complexities. And Natural Science is brilliant, with 3 distinct movements. The artwork and visual symbolism are a lot of fun. If you visually explore the album for hours, you can still find bits that you hadn't noticed before. Hemispheres. This is my all-time favorite, and very first Rush album I purchased. The artwork took me in immediately. The gatefold cover provided moody photographs of a very serious and very progressive-looking trio of musicians. And the package contained a poster. How cool is that? I was studying music at the time, so hearing supreme musicianship was gratifying, and even more so through the complex serenity of Hemispheres. This album ended up being one of the most difficult to perform live, as the timing and signatures are both mentally and physically demanding. Hemispheres is pure 1970s progressive hard rock. Clockwork Angels. I've always been a fan of new Rush material, so I was absolutely jazzed to learn that the most recent and what would turn out to be final Rush album, Clockwork Angels, would be performed live in near entirety. On top of that, a string section was added to many of the songs. While this was not the first time outside musicians joined Rush on a song or two, Ben Mink and Hugh Syme are key examples here, it was the first time that the album's concept fused other musicians, providing an end result that almost gave us a different, bigger Rush. The album has an eerie, yet hopeful feel to it. It's a complete story, yet with standalone songs. This is a mature Rush album, but one that has fun referencing many riffs and arches from the past. Lines like, "In a world where I feel so small, I can't stop thinking big," have become central to the Rush vocabulary. Another fun aspect of this album was the era in which it was released, a time when records were starting to make a comeback, after years of being relegated to antique stores and flea markets. A couple of special edition discs with incredible Hugh Syme artwork for The Garden, for example, are collectible additions to anyone's music collection. All the World's a Stage. Rush's first live album, of what would prove to be several. All the World's a Stage was recorded in its entirety at Toronto's Massey Hall. Now, Massey is not Toronto's biggest venue, or even favorite venue for many people. It is, however, the only music house that provided Canadians with their very own version of New York's Carnegie Hall. For many musical acts, this was a treasured place to play. For its time, this is an exceptionally clean live album. Everything is clear, and almost sounds like a live album using technology and dexterity of musicianship that come from decades of experience. The packaging was gatefold and included 3 LPs. It was also the only live LP where Geddy is screaming without his voice wavering even for a second, where Alex is riffing on guitar with sounds that make things seem like there are at least 4 overdubs, and Neil providing the embryo of what would be his classic, ever-evolving movement in percussion. A Caress of Steel. I can sense the raised eyebrows of you, the listener. This was the album that nearly killed the band, after all. It's an album that some call overly ambitious, challenging to listen to, and meandering without enough focus. Legend has it that Paul Stanley of Kiss heard an early take of Caress of Steel in a tour van and declared, "I don't get it." Revisiting Caress years later, you'll find that this album has some of Rush's more bizarre and extremely cool musical sculptures built within it. It's so odd in some places that it's actually very cool. Nothing more will be said about Caress at this point. Go put it on, give it a listen, see what you think. Moving Pictures. There really isn't anything to say about Moving Pictures that hasn't been said before. So I'll provide a context to why this is so important to me. When the album was released, a Toronto radio station, Chum FM, had a live in-studio program where the new album was played between conversations with Getty. They spoke about the imagery on the cover. They spoke about recording at Le Studio in Quebec. That evening for me was a record release event, an intimate music and words session with only Getty, the Chum FM DJ, and me sitting in our family rec room on a cold February day. Years later, as I aged into my university years, then into the beginnings of a career, much of my focus involved politics. Well, not only do political themes resonate and recur throughout Moving Pictures, but the cover image and its source of video moving footage, which we would all learn about later at concerts, was built around the front entrance of Queen's Park, the legislative building in Ontario, and a place that would occupy much of my time in years to come. For reasons quite different than those cited by most people, Moving Pictures stands as an all-time favorite. And Test for Echo. I originally wasn't the biggest fan of Test for Echo. I expected something harder, something louder, and this was something that was something else entirely. Neil had adopted different drumming techniques on this album, and here we were introduced to a more melodic feel and beat that had been customary in past albums. Deeper listens would reveal fuller and intricate drum structures juxtaposed against a softly hard interplay of bass and Alex's numerous string instruments. Some of the songs have evolved into some of my favorites, and the feel of the album has a hardish edge with an interesting blend of musical accessibility and listening catchiness. Not that I ever would have described any of Rush's work as catchy, but this was an album that contained many songs you could actually hum to. And the instrumentation is phenomenal. The album's imagery is classic Hugh Syme artistry that crafts a visual interpretation of Neil's lyrics with the use of the Inukshuk, helping fans add an interesting Canadian Inuit word into their vocabulary, and one that ended up on the odd billboard over record stores and warehouses in Toronto. At the end of the day, you're going to find your own favorites and your reasons why you want to listen to those selections again and again. Rush was fluid in its approach to music, and that comes through on many albums, which is why the context of a Rush album, those things outside the package, is often just as important as the music, lyrics, and artwork within the package. Visit stephenchristiansen.ca for more podcasts. This program is available on premium streaming platforms including Anchor, Breaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and TuneIn. I'm Stephen Christiansen. Thanks for listening.